Who does this game mean more for? Hey, Shedeur Sanders, and we've gone over how much this game means for him, and we touched on Kevin Stefanski because, again, if Kevin's job is riding on the line, if they truly haven't made that decision, a win today does give more reason of doubt of whether or not ownership wants to move on from Kevin as a head coach or not.
Because if you look at it this way, we're just talking about the Cincinnati Bengals while we're going around the AFC North. It's like, okay, well, say you win today, and then the Bengals sit Joe Burrow, and you could win next week against Jake Browning or Joe Flacco. And it's like, well, it kind of makes the argument for firing Kevin Stefanski a little bit more difficult. Like, are you going to really fire a guy that won his last 2 games, even though the results still would only show 5 wins, and that is a really bad season, and you would have effectively gone 3 wins last year to 5 wins this year. That's not a great improvement by any mark. However, it does make firing him a little bit more difficult because you will have people that say, hey, now wait a minute, he won his last 2 games, and if you're winning your last 2 games, Shedeur Sanders is probably looking all right. So I think a big piece of this is how it looks. However, I tend to say that Shedeur Sanders has more on the line and more to gain with a good showing today against the Steelers and then next week against Cincinnati because, again, if you win these games, you could effectively make Andrew Berry's life a whole lot harder. It makes it a lot harder on the team to draft your replacement. So I'm going to say Shedeur Sanders has more to gain with good showings over the next couple of weeks because even if they win these next 2, I think you could still look at Kevin Stefanski and say, well, now, wait a minute, you've only went from winning 3 games to winning 5 games. That's not a tremendous improvement. So I'm going to say Shedeur has more to gain today.
I would sit in the same boat. I do think it gets interesting, though, with Kevin we've all latched on to some Jimmy Haslam quotes that he said over the course of the offseason and getting ready for this year. We latched on to the swing and a miss thing all the way back in April, and then we fast forward to July, and it was, hey, 3 wins isn't enough. They need to do better. Don't pick a win total. We're not going to put a number on it, but we'll know what better looks like. Part of me does start to wonder, is like, okay, 5 wins I'm sure was not the win total that they had in mind. That was not what they were striving for. But at the same time, if you go through and you go, okay, but we were looking for better quarterback play. This is a fact-finding mission, and with Kevin, you got some bad games out of Shedeur, but if at the end of the last 3 weeks was competitive against Buffalo, took down the Pittsburgh Steelers, and whatever happens in Week 18, if you take down the Cincinnati Bengals, it's like, there's no argument that's in the direction of this team looking a hell of a lot better than they did last year, despite also beating the Steelers in a home game last year. Like that is end of season progression towards this team actually making improvements, maybe finally feeling like they have a quarterback that maybe they like. That's kind of the odd part of this, is like, I do wonder how much of the Dillon Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders conversation also plays into that. Like, if this
I was just about to go there. It's going to go down to, and this is going to irritate everybody that works at this station. It's going to irritate every Browns fan listening to us. It really might boil down to what happened behind closed doors, where there were no cameras, where there were no microphones, where there was no press conference. When you drafted these 2 rookie quarterbacks, and all intents and purposes, it seemed like Kevin Stefanski was standing 10 toes down on not wanting to play Shedeur Sanders this year. Because then if I'm Jimmy Haslam, I'm looking at this and saying, yes, we did get better quarterback play, but it came from the guy that you were adamant about not ever putting on the football field. It came from the guy that you didn't want to put out there over the 3rd round pick, where everybody seems like you really like Dillon Gabriel. So it really, I think, can come down to how dug in was Kevin Stefanski on Dillon Gabriel and on not seeing Shedeur Sanders this year? Because if he was dug in on that, it makes it a whole lot easier to just say, well, you know what? You didn't even know what you were talking about, and we're going to let somebody else coach Shedeur Sanders next year.
Yeah, and on the flip side, if this is an organizational decision, if this is the organization going, okay, whether or not we have more belief, listen, draft capital will tell you that somebody in that building had more belief in Dillon Gabriel than Shedeur Sanders. At that point in time, there's no argument against that. But if this was, okay, the 2 quarterbacks are here, the organization's decision is we start with Joe Flacco. The next logical move, we're getting Dillon Gabriel ready to play, and Shedeur is that developmental piece, whether that's the entirety of this year, whether we see him at the end of the year, and that was kind of the thought process, even if it was, we're getting Shedeur ready to play here in the next couple of weeks before the Dillon injury even happened. And it was, that's the 3rd guy we're going to see, right? We're not going to go down the route of playing him over Dillon. It's not a true competition. It's get him developed, get him ready, and he's the 3rd quarterback we see. Well, if that's an organizational decision, I think the argument for keeping Kevin has more validity to it than certainly if it's not. Like, if they go the organizational route, if that's the route we want to go down, then everybody was lockstep. Everybody was on the same page of it goes Dillon, then Shedeur, and this entire, wild narrative that Kevin wanted to see Shedeur fail and that, all of these other things that have been thrown out there was actually just the Browns' plans at quarterback this year. I think that takes a little bit of the weight off of Kevin. I mean, at the end of the day, you still went 5-12. Your job's on the line. But I would think that part of it gets thrown out, and this is more evaluated on just what the season was and not the quarterback catastrophe that we witnessed.
Yeah, but then again, to play devil's advocate here, then shouldn't that onus be on everybody? Like, shouldn't Andrew Berry then get baked into this conversation where we can genuinely ask, why'd we waste 5 weeks in the middle of an NFL season? Again, this isn't the MLB. This isn't the NBA where you're allotted time where you could try things out. Like, this is the National Football League. You only get 17 Sundays to be able to do this. So you wasted 5 of those 17 in the middle of the season on Dillon Gabriel, who looked completely overmatched and as if he didn't even belong in most of those games in which he started that ultimately led to his concussion that led us to Shedeur Sanders. It leads to the organizational questions of, well, why did we do this anyway? Because we actually did find a little promise, and we're left with questions in the last 2 weeks. We're cramming for a test here. We're trying to evaluate this guy over the last 2 weeks, such a small sample size. Well, if you didn't waste 5 weeks in the middle of the season with Dillon Gabriel, maybe we would have a better answer on Shedeur Sanders and the current status of this entire thing.
Yeah, well, that's what makes this so wild, is that we are going to sit here and the heads are going to be scratched about whether or not this is going to be a behind-the-scenes battle. This is going to be what happened, like you said, when nobody was actually able to see, when we have no insight. Was it Kevin that wanted Dillon? Was that the hard push? Because that's the way it felt to me.
It did.
But
is that what happened?
Right. I can't sit here and say for fact. This would be our final, probably, weekly reminder, although we'll do it in Week 18 as well, because some of you are playing in those leagues where fantasy football extends into Week 18. Let me tell you right now, you got to change your playoff format. We can't be having Week 18 fantasy football.
Because sometimes these Week 18 games, they just don't matter. And if you need a guy to be playing and to be playing well in a meaningless game that does not matter, you're going to be left pretty upset.
Yeah, nothing would be worse than being like, I have Joe Burrow starting in my fantasy football championship, and here comes either the only week that there's a matchup for my championship or even week 2 and being like, Joe Burrow's not playing because the Cincinnati Bengals have 6 wins and they don't want to get him hurt, not because he's hurt or he's not playing well enough.
I think of the other big fantasy football contributors too, like even if you had like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, what's the reason for him to go out there in a Week 18 where the Lions aren't going to make the playoffs and really fight for your playoff livelihood? It's probably not likely. So if you're in the 18-week league, it is my recommendation, Jake's recommendation. You talk to the commission, you get that flipped to a 17-week.
Yeah, definitely get that one cleaned up. A couple of big things to note today. Travion Henderson, if you're relying on him, has been in concussion protocol. He appeared in a non-contact jersey on Friday, but now it's starting to lean towards, I think Travion could play today, could be out there. I think he is technically cleared to be able to go out there and play. A.J. Brown had his wisdom teeth removed. He looks like he's going to be good to play. He returned to practice on Friday.
Eagles fans were not happy about that, by the way. On my social media timeline, people up there were up in arms about A.J. Brown deciding to get the wisdom tooth surgery today, or this week leading up to a game. People were mad.
I mean, I'm going to imagine that's something where it's like the wisdom teeth are coming in. It's causing so much pain to the point where I'm imagining he's not like, getting essentially a preemptive surgery of like, hey, those need to come out and it might cost you going to your job this week. Even though it's not hurting you, it's not causing. I'm imagining that there's probably something there. George Kittle, a game time decision today. Lamar Jackson obviously didn't play yesterday. Either did Jordan Love. So maybe you've had to scour the waiver wire for a quarterback this week. Dalton Kincaid looks like he's going to be out again. There's a few different things to keep your eye on this week, but for the most part, I would say that teams getting slightly more healthy, other than obviously the Cleveland Browns that you have Quinshawn. That's unfortunate.
That's really tough. However, Dylan Sampson, questionable coming into this matchup, but I believe in some like fantasy, like ESPN fantasy had him projected like almost 13 points with no Quinshon Judkins. I personally think the Browns are probably more likely to do it by committee today. Like it's probably going to be a little Sampson, a little Raheem Rocket Sanders, and a little Travion Williams. So I don't know that I love Dylan Sampson today, but if you had a Quinshon and you absolutely do need somebody, I mean, they're projecting him to have almost 13 points. We saw Sanders trust the check down a lot more last week, so could be worth a look.
I'll tell you right now, odds and lines coming up at 9:20. Dylan Sampson will be mentioned. I promise you that. And again, that's our fantasy football segment brought to you by our good friends over there at Homestyle Home Improvements, improving what matters since 2002. It's time that we have the conversation at this point. We've had a couple of these conversations throughout the year, Nick, but I think we're getting to the point where I do just have questions on Jerry Jeudy. Not even so much whether he's going to be in Cleveland, because I think that heavily leans towards the answer of yes, just based on cap space and everything else.
Yeah, the contract.
But now I'm looking at it, and it's like, he still hasn't developed a relationship with Shedeur Sanders. I mean, he goes out last week, what was it, 3 catches for 12 yards in a game where it was separated by 3 points, and he's your lead wide receiver. I think we could all answer pretty much at this point, probably not a wide receiver 1, probably more of a wide receiver 2, and I'm sure people might have their question on that at this point. I would say it's safe to say he's a wide receiver 2. But with everything that's gone down, with the body language, like Lance Reisland's going to be on with JP coming up here at 10 o'clock. Earlier this week on Afternoon Drive, he had gone pretty hard at Jerry Jeudy for bad body language, a bad mindset, carrying himself in a way that, isn't indicative of a team that's continuing to compete and trying to put the best out there. I wonder at this point if the damage that he's done, just for his image in Cleveland, is basically to the point where it's becoming irreparable.
Probably. I mean, like, and unless, so, like, there's a world, right? And the NFL is such a week-to-week business. Like, if he could get on the same page as Sanders over these next 2 weeks, you know how this goes as well as I do. People will forget about what they said about Jerry Jeudy, and at least we'll have some level of optimism going into next season that if you could draft another receiver that could become the de facto 1 and Jerry Jeudy is the 2, okay, you could really have something. Again, that's reliant on Jerry actually doing something productive over these next 2 weeks. And then when you look to next season, like, I think a lot of people will just be more excited about whatever the Browns do at receiver, whether it's bringing in a veteran via trade like a Brandon Ayuk. We've seen Andrew Berry fall in love with the receiver trade before, or if they draft a guy in the first round, as they probably should, a Carnell Tate or a Malachi Lemon, one of these guys, get them to Cleveland. I mean, Browns fans are going to just cling to whatever is next because we are so fed up with Jerry Jeudy. Like, if they're able to draft Carnell Tate, there will be the inherent, like, this is an Ohio State receiver that, the pedigree speaks for itself, and Browns fans will innately be excited because it's a Buckeye coming to Cleveland. But, dude, that'll be tenfold because of how frustrated we are with Jerry Jeudy and how ready we are to cling to whatever is next. It's the similar thing, like whatever quarterback the Browns were going to get to move on from Deshaun Watson was going to be exciting, and they went with the most exciting option imaginable in Shedeur Sanders. So of course we're all signed up for that, and we want Shedeur to be the guy because of how dreadful Deshaun was to watch. It's kind of the same thing in my mind. Like, we are going to be ready for whatever is next with this wide receiver position group because I know I'm done with Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the thing, though, Nick, is like I look at this, and outside of him becoming a wide receiver 1 again, like going out there and putting up over 1,200 yards and just looking like he's having an incredible season next year, even if Jerry goes out there and is a fine wide receiver 2, I don't know that anybody in this city, really, like fans of this team at this point, are looking at him as like thank God we have Jerry Jeudy in Cleveland. I think there's always going to be, without that kind of upgrade, like this stain on Jerry Judy's just image in this city and with this team. I don't think people are ever going to wrap their arms back around Jerry unless he does make that massive leap. We know, again, all is forgotten if you're able to just put everything behind you and have incredible stats on the field. I don't see that necessarily coming into Jerry's future. Like, I don't even think that I see him being a wide receiver 1 at this point in the league. So you go out there and put up, 700 yards in a season? That's going to still sound to me, it's a guy who you probably don't want on the team, right? Like, if you go out there and you have 1,000-yard receiver and a rookie, I mean, asking for a lot there. But even if it's 700, 800 yards, it's going to be, oh great, we have Denver Jerry Jeudy. Like, that's not a positive image. And I think that as much as the quarterback situation has hurt Jerry over the course of this, I can't help but stare at that and say that's also a lot of Jerry's own doing too.
Well, it's just wild to me because, like, you would think, and he did an all right job of it, like, throughout his entire first season in Cleveland with the Browns. And then really for the first half of this year, he was a good soldier. He was on task and on assignment. And even though things weren't going his way earlier this season, he was at least at bay. Like, you weren't seeing Jerry Jeudy freak out after every loss the way that you have in the second half of this season. But I'm with you. I think at this point, like, okay, say you've got a 700, 800 yard receiver in Jerry Jeudy on a yearly basis. Well, we've been looking for a guy like that here in Cleveland, admittedly, but like those kind of grow on trees elsewhere in the National Football League. Like, you could find guys that can give you that kind of production where you don't have to have that massive salary attached to it that the Browns gave Jerry Jeudy for whatever reason. And you also don't have to have the headache that follows. Your average run-of-the-mill Rashard Hollywood Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Like, if that's what you're going to be getting out of Jerry Jeudy, well, you might as well go find a Hollywood Higgins or a DPJ where the headache doesn't follow.
I mean, listen, if he was an 800-yard receiver every year when he got here, I don't know necessarily that people would be, like, massively upset. You probably would have looked at this contract, and I think people would have been like, okay, well, you basically paid him like a wide receiver 2. He's played like a wide receiver 2, especially if that's what he was on this team, right?
Right.
Like, if you had another guy playing above him and he was that consistent, like, 700-yard guy, you'd probably be like, all right, well, whatever. Like, the money probably came close to working out. He was a fine piece. You probably don't put him on another contract, and you go find somebody else to do it at a cheaper rate. It's the fact of, like, everything that you look at. Now, I will push back on the people who hate the contract right now. Guys, if they would have waited to pay Jerry Jeudy, do you understand that he would have been paid after a 1,200-yard season, that the money would have been more expensive than it is right now, and you'd still be getting the exact same product that you're receiving right now?
When I can't speak out of both sides of my mouth either, because, like, I was all aboard that contract extension when it hit. Because if you remember, they made that trade and then they extended Jerry right away. That was before Justin Jefferson. That was before Jamar Chase. So I was thinking to myself, I was like, even if this guy can be a fringe number 1, which he was last year, I was like, this is going to look like a genius contract because you're getting out in front of it before we knew that Jefferson and Chase were going to break the bank. It looked really smart. The issue was the production didn't live up to that 1,300 yards that he almost had last year, and he's certainly taken a big step back from that this season. But yeah, ultimately, you're paying him as a number 2. He is a number 2, if not a number 3, in a lower end number 2 at times. So it's simple. You just need to get somebody this offseason that is going to be a number 1. So we don't ever have to live in this universe where you or I have to dilute ourselves into believing that Jerry Jeudy is anything more than what he is. And Steve Smith, Seeger or Junior or whatever, had it right. He's just a guy, and we need to be all right with that.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way at this point.
And it stinks because he's this Bama pedigree. Like, the pedigree is there. You should be better than what you are. We know you have it in you, but he's just not. So it is what it is.
I think part of what I hate about this season, right, is like I was talking to Jeff Phelps earlier this week, and it's like, okay, I right now I'm looking at Miles to get the sack. I'm excited to see Shedeur play for the final 2 games. Outside of that, like, the conversations that we have about guys who are excited for this team turn into, like, Malachi Corley and can Mahmoud Diabate and Todd from Ward 1, who's a common caller, was like, I'm interested to see what the linebackers do. And it's like, I know what Swessinger does. Pretty confident I know what Devin Bush does. So I'm looking at Diabate right now to show what he has. Like, I'm not interested in that, right? That is, 1, very bad for radio. Not that anybody cares. But 2, also just not interesting as a fan. It's sad to the point that we're at the season right now where today is going to be mostly about Miles, a lot about Shedeur. But the other thing that I'm keeping my eye on today, I'm going to be staring at Jerry Jeudy. I'm going to be like, what does the body language look like? Are you actually out there running routes? Or are you just going to be disappointed and miserable the way that you've looked the last few weeks? It's like, that's the type of thing that in a city like this, in a blue-collar town where guys, everybody goes to work and they suck it up and they go and they put on their best work for 8 hours a day, no matter what it is, that Judy's getting to play the game he loves and he goes out there and makes it look like he doesn't want to be out there. That's the type of thing that in this town gets you ran out of this town. It's like, I'm looking for Jerry to clean it up, but I don't know that I'm going to get that.